I just didn't think it would actually happen. She's never gonna get married. She's never gonna have children.
What do you have to say to families who think this can't happen to my family?
Oh, that is absolutely not true.
Never say, not my child or not my loved one. You do not know.
They feel no pain, they hit the ground, they're gone.
This is 2 milligrams of what would be considered a lethal dose of fentanyl.
It's so deadly that a dot can kill you.
They're laced, they're lethal, and they're widely available.
This is a hidden epidemic that not enough people are talking about.
It can kill you right away.
Whether it be cocaine,
Xanax, meth.
You could smoke pot, and it could be in the pot. It's scary out there.
What more can we be doing to stop this?
So this is a fentanyl test strip. We provide injection assistance to our participants, so helping them find a vein, actually inserting the needle into their arm, but not pushing it down. That's our hard line. We don't push that plunger down.
What do you have to say to people who think that this is pretty controversial, actually helping someone do this?
You can't find help, you can't find recovery if you're dead.
there's no such thing as experimenting with drugs safely.
Every single relationship that you have, every single thing that you touch will turn to dust.
My name is Karen Schwartz. My son, Reed Michael Schwartz.
My daughter is Joelle Merla Savis.
He passed away on December 20th,
2021 from
ingesting cocaine laced with fentanyl.
Poisoning of fentanyl.
she died from fentanyl poisoning.
Perhaps listening to us and looking at their faces saves at least one other child.
Stephen existed. Your son existed. Your daughter existed. Your daughter existed. Your son existed.
And I miss him every minute of every day, every second. He was so kind and so understanding. Wherever he went, there was happiness and laughter.
He's known for being the pitcher, the left-handed pitcher.
Right. His nickname was the Bulldog. And whenever they were in trouble and they needed somebody to go out there and pitch, it was him. My son had an injury in college. He had a double hernia surgery. So they started giving him pain medicine, because when you're a pitcher, it comes from your core. And at the time, I really didn't know what opioids were, or really was not familiar with it. And you know, he says, "Mom, don't worry, they're giving me pain medication and I'll be able to pitch," because I was worried that he just had the surgery and he was out there pitching. So little did I know that this was the beginning, you know, for him, and that he struggled. I think this dependency, to do drugs for recreational purposes is one thing, but to have to do drugs to get through your day, a regular day, to wake up and face your day, then that's what I think was the issue. I was sleeping and I heard a thump, like a really loud thump. And I ran down the stairs and he was in the bathroom, and I knocked the door down, I broke the door down, and I found him in the bathroom. I found out afterwards that he had cocaine with carfentanil, which is 100 times stronger than regular fentanyl.
If there's an overdose that happens, hospital, police department, they'll call to this center and you'll dispatch out an investigator.
That's correct.
So they're all investigated,
Yes,
every single one of them.
that's our responsibility. But for the COVID pandemic, this would be the public health emergency of our lifetime. And we see it every day. Your next dose could contain fentanyl. It can kill you right away.
What is fentanyl?
Fentanyl is an opioid. It's a synthetic opioid, and it is over 100 times stronger than morphine.
I mean, you don't stand a chance with fentanyl. If one drop, one morsel, if it's in anything, kills you. There's no coming back.
This is 2 milligrams of what would be considered a lethal dose of fentanyl.
It looks like a little bit of sugar.
It's exactly all it looks like. It doesn't take much at all.
This fentanyl is in everything now. It's in Percocet, it's in Adderall. We're seeing fentanyl laced in every drug.
Even marijuana.
It's in every city, it's in every state, it's in every drug.
People could buy this thinking it's an oxycodone pill, but it's really pure fentanyl.
Correct, correct.
So they have no idea really what they're ingesting.
Exactly. Basically, what DEA has found out is essentially 4 out of every 10 tablets contains a lethal dose of fentanyl.
The coroner tells me there were hardly any drugs in her body. I have the report, but there was enough fentanyl to kill about 49 people. So they murdered my daughter.
Why are the cartels and sellers putting this in the drugs in the first place?
They are intentionally lacing these counterfeit prescription pills with fentanyl to drive addiction, to create a greater customer base and to increase the addiction and their profit margins by enlarging the amount of people that they can sell their poison to.
The mothers we sat down with said there is no longer any such thing as safe experimentation.
That's absolutely correct.
To this day, it just still doesn't feel real to me. I still feel like she's gonna come home.
Did you know what fentanyl was before your daughter's passing?
I actually did, because my daughter had 3 friends that also passed away from fentanyl before she passed.
3 friends died?
3 friends died within the span of, I'd say about a year.
Does that have something to say about how addictive these drugs are and also how powerful fentanyl is?
Absolutely. Because she truly believed that she was going to survive.
What did you say to her as a mother when you found out that 3 of her friends died?
That I cannot lose you. If I lost you, I don't know what I would do with myself. I just didn't think it would actually happen.
Does time make anything better?
Time changes things, but unfortunately it doesn't make it any better, and it stays with you, and there's lots of ups and downs, comes in waves. The missing of Reed and just the longing for him, that will never go away.
It's wiping away a generation of young people.
How does it feel being with all these moms today?
It's layers of emotion. I'm heartbroken that, we're members of this terrible club. It's like having open heart surgery and someone ripping your heart out without the benefit of anesthesia. That's what it feels like.
It's my first thought in the morning and my last thought at night and all my thoughts in between. It doesn't even seem real.
And thinking about the what should have been.
I struggle with that every day. I struggle with that every day, that my son should be out there getting married, and I wanted to see him throwing a baseball with his son or his daughter, and I was robbed.
Communities across the country are trying to prevent more deaths from happening. The city of New York is doing that in 2 major ways, which could become models for other communities, starting with what's called overdose prevention centers, places where people can go to do illegal drugs under supervision. There isn't anything else like it in the country yet, and we received behind-the-scenes access.
It's a safe place for people to come in with their illicit drugs and to use safely with supervision. So we have people injecting, sniffing, smoking, and a combination. This day with the fentanyl, we're finding fentanyl in the drugs that people are smoking, and so an overdose can happen from not an opiate.
So people bring their own drugs here and use the drugs under safe supervision from you?
Yes, exactly. We don't provide any drugs ourselves. We just provide clean supplies for people to use drugs and supervision.
How many people have you witnessed start to overdose in this room?
We have over 100 overdoses in this room. Myself been a part of almost all of them.
You said success is in the numbers. What are the numbers?
So we're over 320 overdose interventions. We have over 1,200, coming up on 1,300 individuals who are using both centers, and the utilizations are close to 23,000. I mean,
23,000 is huge.
23,000 is huge. This is 6 months, don't forget.
So we're looking for eyes rolling back, heads nodding back, arms tilting down, and these are classic signs of overdose. So with these mirrors, I can monitor everybody in the room at one point.
You can see the reflection in case they're starting to overdose.
Yep, so I could see across the other side of the room if their eyes are rolling back, if their head's tilting back, without invading their space as much.
Who are the people showing up to use drugs here at your centers?
A lot of different people. I will say what we find in our East Harlem site are people who are a little older, people who smoke more, and then in our Washington Heights site we're seeing a younger population who inject more. These are brothers, sisters, lovers, partners, folks from all walks of life.
I wish I understood what the attraction is and why I can't stop.
Drug users like Mark say this center has saved his life. He gave us consent to interview him before using.
It hurts. I have a 6-year-old son that I haven't seen in months because my mother won't allow me to be in his space in this condition. And I love my son.
But the addiction's so powerful.
Yeah, it makes me feel like I'm choosing this over him. And, he's asking for me now, and it hurts, and I feel so ashamed.
So the city's view is you can't prevent everyone from using. Let's make sure they're using safely.
As long as there have been drugs in the annals of history, dating back to opium, people have used them. So the idea that we are going to eliminate all drug use in our country, in our world, is a fallacy. What we need to do is focus on saving lives.
So over here we have all the supplies you might need to use drugs from a variety of different sizes. Syringes, cookers, tourniquets, Band-Aids, and then our sniffing supplies. So we provide injection assistance to our participants, so helping them find a vein, actually inserting the needle into their arm, but not pushing it down. That's our hard line. We don't push that plunger down.
What do you have to say to people who think that this is pretty controversial, actually helping someone do this to themselves?
Yeah, totally. I mean, what we like to say is, you can't find help, you can't find recovery if you're dead, right? So in this space, we're just trying to keep people alive.
What do you have to say to anyone who might believe that we are enabling drug addicts by doing more drugs by opening these centers?
I think that stigma and shame and discrimination against people who use drugs has shown over centuries to not stop drug use, but to simply push it further into the darkness, into the shadows, where the risk of having a fatal event, a fatal overdose, is increased.
So usually they're at their worst state by the time they reach us.
People who use drugs here also have access to nurses and doctors and treatment programs.
A lot of times when they come in to actually see us, they are in poor shape and they don't have good nutrition, which makes wound healing a lot more difficult. So after the addiction, that's the second thing.
I ask people to stay open and remain open. No one has to die of an overdose ever again. So we know that. Yes, people are bringing illegal drugs in here. Those same people are going to use those illegal drugs elsewhere. What we're doing is keeping them alive.
Here's one of the tools they use to help keep them alive, a test strip. A way to see if there's any fentanyl inside the drug before ingesting it. The health department says it can be a lifesaver. It has also become controversial.
And if they think they're buying cocaine, that's all they should be buying. If they think they're buying heroin, that's all they should be buying.
These parents believe fentanyl test strips could have saved their children's lives.
There's fentanyl test strips.
Yes.
That's a controversial issue, but it saves lives, just like naloxone can save a life.
So this is what it looks like.
They use the strips inside the overdose prevention centers.
Every batch of heroin that we've tested since 2017 is positive for fentanyl.
Every batch?
Every batch. So when people come in with heroin, I tell them it's got fentanyl in it. So really what those fentanyl test strips are awesome for is people using non-opiates. So people using crack cocaine, methamphetamines, MDMA, drugs that you wouldn't expect to have an opioid in.
But they're not just used here. The city's health commissioner recommends them for all users.
We're trying to give people who choose to use the knowledge and information to do so as safely as possible.
How do test strips work, and do you recommend them?
Definitely recommend them, and they're pretty simple to use. You take whatever substance you have, whatever recreational drug you have, and you mix it in with a predetermined amount of water. There's instructions that come with the kit.
So it could be the difference between life and death.
100%. There's just an uncertainty, and the only way to be certain about what you're using is to test it in advance, and these test strips are a life-saving tool.
I would say there is no responsible way to use an illicit drug.
But the Drug Enforcement Administration isn't convinced. They use highly sophisticated equipment inside their labs to determine the presence of fentanyl. They do not rely on test strips and say users shouldn't either.
These test strips that are being advertised in the public are not as easy as just dropping a little bit of powder onto a tablet or onto a test strip. So these test strips are not going to give you an accurate reading, and therefore it is not okay to use.
Says drugs have hot spots of fentanyl inside them, and it all depends on which part you test.
There's no quality control in these pills. How are we ever going to know whether the piece of the pill that they scraped off will in fact be lethal or not? So whatever portion of the pill they're testing might in fact be negative. But there's other spots in the pill that could have that potential lethal dose.
Do you think these test strips are lifesavers?
They're definitely lifesavers for people not our heroin users, right? For people using recreational drugs, for people using cocaine or other stimulants, and mostly for people not expecting to use opiates, right? You might not have that tolerance, you might not be aware that that could even be a reality.
But it is a reality. People are dying of an overdose in the U.S. every 5 minutes. The feds say they're using every tool available to help cut down on the amount of fentanyl in the U.S. This is a rare look inside the federal lab in New York City, where all of the drugs from 10 states in the Northeast are sent to be analyzed.
There's no quality control here. There's no way of knowing how much is in each of those plastic bags.
I'm working on 1 unit samples that are suspected fentanyl and heroin. So with this, I am going to do the same process over and over and over.
You say you're getting so much drugs into this facility, you're running out of room.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
What are we looking at here?
These are some of the seizures that we've seen here in the DEA's Northeast Laboratory. Here we have some fake oxycodone tablets that contain fentanyl. Here's some what we call glassine bags packaged for street level distribution with different stamps. All of these contain fentanyl and heroin.
Special Agent, we were just in the lab. That is a lot of drugs.
It is, and you're only looking at a small microcosm of the amount of drugs that we're seizing across the country.
Where is this fentanyl coming from?
China is the #1 country responsible for shipping mass quantities of fentanyl and precursor chemicals into Mexico that are then being mass produced in these super labs to create these fentanyl-laced counterfeit prescription pills that then flood into the United States and end up in downtown New York City or any other major city across the United States.
And you think a lot of this is coming from primarily 2 drug cartels?
Well, there's a number of different cartels that are responsible for mass producing these fentanyl-laced counterfeit prescription pills, but when we look at our area of responsibility, the Northeast region, and specifically New York and New York City, it's the Sinaloa cartel and CJNG that are responsible for causing the most harm. And this is why we're targeting them.
When it comes to fentanyl, are we seeing any trends where it's increasing into our area?
We've seen fentanyl increase several times over the last couple of years, especially in this area. Just to give you a rough idea, 50% of my staff right now is working on either heroin or fentanyl cases.
As opposed to anything else?
As opposed to anything else.
And that wasn't the case 5 years ago?
Probably not, no.
How are we going to win against drug cartels in other countries?
We're looking at every opportunity to hold the people accountable. And it doesn't necessarily matter whether they sit in Michoacan, Mexico, or if they're sitting in the Bronx or Queens or Brooklyn or somewhere in Manhattan. We're looking at all avenues to investigate, and we're looking at all persons responsible for pushing this poison onto our city streets. And so that's why we use a top-down, bottom-up approach.
While the feds fight their battle, getting treatment, the right treatment for users, is a battle of its own, which has been made even more difficult by the COVID-19 pandemic.
I'll always be an addict.
Christopher Kelly struggled with addiction his entire adult life. It took him 3 decades to get clean.
I knew I was slowly killing myself. And I knew, but the disease is so powerful. It makes you think that there's nothing wrong. You don't have the problem.
And the key here is the word disease. It's a disease.
Yes, it is definitely a disease.
And disease needs treatment.
Yes.
He stayed in a rehab facility like this not just once, but 6 times to overcome his addiction.
Addiction is very powerful. It's cunning, it's baffling, it's insidious. It constantly tells you that there's nothing wrong, that you're okay, that you can just take one more, or you can just have another drink, and it's such a liar.
He stopped using before fentanyl started showing up in drugs.
My chances would definitely be lower.
At Samaritan Daytop Village, they're treating about 17,000 people in their in- and outpatient facilities across the New York City area.
The amount of clients that have had some exposure or fentanyl use continues to trend up.
And they're experiencing another trend. They're having to use more of this, the life-saving drug to help reverse overdoses.
Our clients that are using fentanyl will need several doses of naloxone. So when we initially started this journey, we would see that the clients would be revived with 1, maybe 2 doses of naloxone. There are times now where I read an incident report and a client took 4 or 5 doses of naloxone before they're revived.
That shows you just how powerful these drugs are.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's a complicated problem, made even more difficult during the pandemic. As overdoses increased, the amount of beds available decreased due to social distancing.
We are competing with COVID, so we have had to have less beds available. So that's definitely not a positive thing.
That creates a slowed down process when it comes to recovery.
It absolutely does.
And they're seeing addiction linked with something else, something you can't see.
But just about all of them have some kind of a mental health disorder. And those mental health disorders or symptoms of a mental health disorder are exacerbated by the drug use.
It's an issue the mothers we spoke with all experience with their own children.
He suffered from addiction. He also suffered from depression and from anxiety. And, I believe that mental illness and substance use disorder, which is what I like to call it rather than addiction, goes hand in hand.
These mothers say their children battled with addiction for years, struggled to get them the help they needed.
As a mother, you think you can fix everything in life, and there was no challenge that I couldn't conquer. I tried everything, and I couldn't do it.
Substance abuse experts say addiction and mental health issues both have to be treated together.
Society in general just doesn't have much empathy or tolerance for mental illness. If you were to approach me with a cast on your leg, I would run ahead of you and open all the doors and make sure, can I carry that for you? Mental illness is so insidious, isn't it? It's not seen. And so people are just not aware.
What more can we be doing to stop this?
I think behind most substance use and addiction, and certainly a lot of overdoses, is pain of some kind. Pain and mental health issues of different varieties. And we in this society have seemed to separate the two issues, addiction over here and mental health over here, but they're actually quite linked.
But there are resources available, especially for those living in the New York City area. It's getting people to show up over and over again.
There is help available, and you don't have to have insurance. You don't have to have resources. You don't have to come in cash at hand. There are a lot of options, and sometimes having too many options is daunting, but it's better than having no options. We want to encourage people to just walk through the door.
How do you want Eric to be remembered?
I don't want him to be remembered for this.
They don't want their children's addiction or deaths to define them, but they do hope it'll help save other parents from experiencing the pain of losing a child.
My life has forever changed, and finding others who live the life that I do is very, very important.
Are there any warning signs that parents should be keeping an eye out for?
Locking the door. When my son started locking the door to his room, that was a concern for me. Very erratic sleeping, breathing issues, very erratic eating, and just really almost like a reclusive person, not the person that he is. He did tell me that it would never be me, and he promised me.
And here we are.
And here we are sitting here.